Welcome to Marginal Thoughts. Have you ever heard the term Ponzi scheme thrown around and thought, okay, but what is that really?
Yeah, it's a term lots of people know, but maybe not the nuts and bolts of how it works.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive just on the basics for anyone who wants that foundational understanding of this, well, unfortunately common type of fraud.
Consider this your Ponzi Schemes 101. We'll break down how they operate, what to look out for, using some real examples to make it clear.
Perfect. So let's start right there. At its absolute core, what is the engine driving a Ponzi scheme? What's the basic trick?
Well, the heart of it is a promise of really high investment returns, often with very little apparent risk.
Sounds good so far.
It does, that's the lure. But the catch is, these returns aren't actually generated by any legitimate business activity or smart investment. It's an illusion.
Okay, so if the money isn't coming from profits, where is it coming from? How are those early investors getting paid those high returns?
And that's the crucial part. The money to pay the earlier investors comes directly from the pockets of newer investors.
Ah, okay, so it's not actually growing, it's just being moved around.
Exactly. Think of it like shuffling money from column B to pay column A. No real value is being created. It's just redistribution.
So it absolutely depends on constantly finding new people to put money in.
Precisely. The whole structure completely relies, on a continuous stream of new investment cash. If that flow of new money even slows down,
Then the payments stop?
then the payments stop. They can't meet the promises, and the entire thing just collapses.
Okay, let's try and picture that. Can you give us a sort of typical example of how one might start and grow?
Sure. Imagine someone, let's call him the orchestrator, offers amazing opportunity, maybe double your money in 6 months, guaranteed.
Wow, okay. Alarm bells might ring there already, but let's say people buy in.
Right, so a few people invest. Now, instead of investing that money, the orchestrator takes the cash from a second wave of investors who were attracted by this promise
And uses that money.
to pay the returns to the first group. Those initial investors are happy, right? They got their amazing return.
And then they tell their friends, I imagine.
Absolutely. They become walking advertisements. Look how much I made. This brings in even more investors, providing the cash to pay the second wave, and so on.
So those early payouts are key to making it look real.
They're critical. They build credibility, create buzz, and mask the fact that there's no actual sustainable profit engine underneath it all.
But it's still just shuffling money. Eventually, the math has to catch up, right?
Always. It's fundamentally unsustainable.
Yeah.
It's just the question of when, not if, it falls apart.
So what usually triggers that collapse? What makes the music finally stop?
Usually it's when the rate of new investment slows down. Maybe word gets out, or the market changes, or they just run out of new people to convince.
Or people start wanting their original money back.
That too. If a large number of investors try to pull their money out at once, especially during, say, an economic downturn, the scheme can't handle it. The money simply isn't there because it's already been paid out or, pocketed by the person running it.
Okay, the mechanics are becoming clearer. What about the warning signs? What are those key characteristics we should look for?
The biggest one, the absolute classic red flag, is that promise of very high returns with little or no risk. Real investments involve risk, and returns fluctuate. Guarantees of high returns are usually too good to be true.
So if it sounds unbelievable, it probably is. What else?
Look for overly consistent returns. If an investment pays out the exact same high percentage month after month, regardless of what the actual markets are doing, that's suspicious. Legitimate returns go up and down.
Right, they reflect reality.
Exactly. Also, be wary if the whole pitch seems more focused on recruiting new investors than on the actual business or investment strategy itself. If the way you make money seems tied to bringing others in, that's a warning sign.
And I've heard these can sometimes seem really complicated or secretive.
Yes, that's another tactic. Using complex jargon, claiming proprietary or secret methods that they can't fully explain. Sometimes that's just to discourage questions and make it seem like you wouldn't understand it anyway. It creates a smokescreen.
Okay. The name itself, Ponzi scheme, is famous. Where did that actually come from? Who was Ponzi?
Ah, yes. Charles Ponzi. He's the namesake, though maybe not the first to run such a scheme. He certainly made it infamous back in the early 20th century.
1920s, right? What was his specific scheme?
In 1920, yes. He promised investors absolutely huge returns, something like 50% profit in 45 days, or 100% in 90 days. unbelievable numbers.
And how did he claim he was doing this? What was the supposed investment?
This is the quirky part. He claimed he was making money through arbitrage on international postal reply coupons.
Postal reply coupons. How would that even work?
The idea, and there was a tiny grain of truth to the concept, was that you could buy these coupons cheaply in a country with a weak currency, send them to another country, like the US, and redeem them for postage stamps worth more than you initially paid due to exchange rates.
Okay, a bit obscure, but I guess theoretically possible on a small scale.
Theoretically, yes. But Ponzi wasn't really doing that, certainly not on the massive scale needed to pay those returns.
So he was just...
He was just using the money from new investors to pay off the earlier ones, the classic model. The postal coupons were just the cover story.
But it worked for a while. People got paid.
Oh, yes. Early investors got their huge returns, exactly as promised. This created a frenzy. People mortgaged their homes, invested their life savings. He became a local hero in Boston for a time.
But the math just couldn't sustain it based on actual coupons.
Not even close. Investigators later calculated that to generate the profits he claimed, there would have needed to be hundreds of millions of these postal coupons in circulation, when in reality there were only tens of thousands. It was impossible.
And then, inevitably,
It collapsed spectacularly. Once the Boston Post started digging into it and questioning the feasibility, the inflow of money dried up, people panicked, and the whole thing imploded, wiping out fortunes.
wow. A cautionary tale, but it didn't stop there. We've seen much bigger versions since then, haven't we?
Sadly, yes. The most infamous recent example has to be Bernie Madoff. His scheme was the largest Ponzi scheme in history, by far. We're talking tens of billions of dollars over many, many years.
And Madoff was different, wasn't he? He was this respected figure on Wall Street.
Exactly. That was key to his success. He wasn't promising Ponzi-level outrageous returns. His were more like consistently good, steady returns year after year, which seemed plausible, even enviable, coming from a respected former NASDAQ chairman.
So he used his reputation and that consistency.
He leveraged trust, exclusivity. You had to know someone to invest with him. He cultivated an aura of legitimacy for decades.
What finally brought his scheme down? Was it similar to Ponzi?
It was the 2008 financial crisis. As the markets tanked, investors, understandably, wanted to pull their money out. But Madoff didn't actually have their money invested. He needed that constant inflow. When the withdrawal requests surged, he couldn't meet them. The house of cards fell.
So different eras, different cover stories, but the same fundamental flaw.
Absolutely. New money paying old investors. That's the core mechanism every time.
Now, people sometimes confuse Ponzi schemes with pyramid schemes. They're both bad, obviously, but what's the actual difference?
That's a good distinction to make. They're similar in that they both rely on an ever-increasing pool of participants, but the focus is slightly different.
How so?
In a classic pyramid scheme, the main way participants make money is by recruiting other people into the scheme. There might be a product, but often it's overpriced or secondary. Your income depends directly on the fees paid by the people you recruit and the people they recruit flowing up the pyramid.
Okay, so recruitment is the explicit engine.
Right. In a Ponzi scheme, the focus presented to the investor is usually on the investment itself. The postal coupons, Madoff's secret strategy, whatever. While the scheme needs new investors' money, the participants themselves aren't necessarily required to do the recruiting. The orchestrator handles that, presenting it as a passive investment opportunity. The fraud is hiding how the returns are generated.
Got it. So pyramid schemes focus on recruiting commissions. Ponzi schemes focus on fake investment returns funded by later investors.
That's a good way to summarize it. Both collapse when recruitment or new investment dries up.
So let's circle back to protecting ourselves. We mentioned high return, slow risk. What are the absolute key takeaways, the warning signs everyone should have on their radar?
Definitely the too good to be true returns, especially guaranteed ones. Be very skeptical of consistency that ignores market reality.
Okay.
Question overly complex or secretive strategies. If you can't understand how the money is made or they won't clearly explain it, that's a major red flag.
Makes sense. Anything else?
High-pressure sales tactics. Anyone rushing you to invest now or you'll miss out. Be careful. Legitimate opportunities usually allow time for due diligence. And fundamentally, try to understand where the returns are actually coming from. If it seems like it depends entirely on new people joining, walk away.
It really is striking how often people still fall for these, despite the warnings. Why do you think that is? What makes us vulnerable?
Well, the desire for easy money is a powerful human emotion, isn't it? The dream of getting rich quickly is very appealing.
Sure, who wouldn't want that?
And these schemes are often presented very convincingly. The people running them can be charismatic, persuasive. They play on hopes and ambitions.
And those early payouts we talked about must be incredibly powerful proof for people.
Absolutely. Seeing is believing for many. When your friend or neighbor gets a big check, that overcomes a lot of skepticism. It creates social proof and encourages you to jump in and tell others.
And you mentioned Madoff leveraging communities. That trust factor seems important too.
Very much so. Schemes often spread through affinity groups, churches, clubs, ethnic communities. People trust recommendations from within their own circles, and unfortunately, that trust can be exploited.
So it really comes down to that old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it almost certainly is. Understanding just these basics we've covered seems like the best defense.
It truly is. Knowing how they work, what the red flags are, and maintaining a healthy dose of skepticism is crucial for protecting yourself financially.
Well, this has been a really helpful deep dive into the fundamentals of Ponzi schemes. A good reminder that real wealth generation typically involves actual business, actual risk, not just financial sleight of hand.
Exactly. Due diligence, asking questions, and trusting your gut when something feels off, those are always good practices.
Definitely. Now, for all of you tuning in, we're really interested in your thoughts. Have you ever come across something that felt like it might be a Ponzi scheme? What warning signs jumped out at you? Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your experiences or takeaways.
And if you found this basic explanation useful and want more deep dives into foundational ideas, please do subscribe to Marginal Thoughts. Thanks so much for joining us today.